Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating young woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hello, my name is Kristin Thompson Poelker, and I am based in the United States, St. Louis, Missouri specifically. If you know Nelly, he too is from the Lou, and he's proud. It was the winter of 2021 when I was on a walk with a friend. And on that walk, I was just telling her what was happening in my life. I finally had opened up for the first time about how the past 6 months had been in my marriage, how the past 6 months had been in my home, how the past 6 months had been with my body, and how it felt foreign to me. And it was at that point when she said, I should add that she does have a background in psychology and psychiatry. She said, I think you're depressed. So I am someone that has always jumped out of bed to seize the day, that has always wanted to grab life by the horns. So it never crossed my mind that I could be depressed. It never crossed my mind that I could be clinically depressed, that I could have a mental health issue. And yet I was finally faced with something that had put my back against the wall on taking care of myself. So what had happened the 6 months prior, well, I'll go back to a year prior. A year prior was January 2020. I thought the world was my oyster. My husband and I had been married for 2 years, and we had always said, let's wait 2 years where we think about having a family. And it was at that point when I thought, why would I slow down? Because in January 2020, I had been in my career for a number of years. I had gotten designations and awards, and I was really succeeding, and thought there's no way I could slow down at this point. And the world had other things in mind, because I don't know if you recall, but maybe something else happened in 2020. It was in early 2020 when I was suddenly finding myself hunkering down in my house. We had to stock up for 2 weeks on all supplies that included food, for some reason, toilet paper, and for me, it was going to be birth control. When I went to obtain my birth control, the cost made it prohibitive. Something that was suddenly free was going to cost. That's a story for another day, the reason why that happened, but it did lead to my husband and I having that discussion of that family. We were talking about family planning. I decided, well, if I might go off birth control anyway, this will be a good time. Let's see if we will maybe have a family. And again, it's 2021, and I was no closer to having that family. In 2021, January of 2021, we had been trying for almost a full year. And at this point, we had already had some round of testing, very basic, non-invasive testing. I was healthy. My husband was hormonally healthy as well. And yet we still were no close to having a family. 3 more months went by, and we got the full diagnosis of unexplained infertility. So actually, that can be a diagnosis. You have everything that should be working, but it's not. By this point, you still are finding ways to blame each other for the problem. So even though we were diagnosed with unexplained infertility, and because we had built our relationship off loving how independent we were, we both needed some help and didn't know how to ask for it. He thought there was still something wrong with him. I thought there was still something wrong with me. I'm a very social person, and I was dealing with this all home alone and couldn't go out. And I didn't also want to go out and talk to people about everything that up to this point I had thought was supposed to happen naturally and what made me a woman was not working. After several more dollars and amounts of time later, we had decided to move on to IVF. So now it is 2022, and we are going through our first round of IVF. So we have already been trying for a child now for 2 years through various methods. Again, some natural, some invasive, some not. Something I didn't expect, and why mental health is part of this, is because one reason why infertility takes so long for most people, because you do hear those stories of someone who tried for children for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, is because all the while you're having hormonal changes, but it's impacting your mental health as well. So there were times when I needed a break, when I just couldn't take it anymore. I thought I was always a very understanding person, and it was the first time I realized how much more empathetic I should and could be, because I learned how crippling depression could be. So how on earth could I bring a child into the world when I couldn't get myself out and to engage in the world? And all the while I was still trying to maintain a job. So then we decided to add IVF to all that, which when people hear that, they know it's hard on your body and it takes so much time. I don't think you ever really know until you go through it. You also think, well, you're going through IVF, maybe that will be your surefire way to have a child. And actually, we went through our first round of IVF and it didn't work. We went through our second round of IVF and it didn't work. So now we're that much more in debt. I should add, I'm a financial advisor. So there's a little bit of shame that I was that much more in debt to try to expand my family. There's that much more secrecy. Again, I had started to share with a very, very small circle in 2021 that we were having struggles, but it still was something that I wasn't walking to the office saying, I just came from an appointment where I had tubes shoved up me. And so it started to become clear to me that for me to get through this and to manage this process, I needed to show up and be true to me, and I needed to continue to be my extrovert self. And part of that comes with processing out loud and engaging with people. And so that's when I started to share my story while I was still in my story, and I didn't know how it was going to end. It was hard sometimes to admit to people that I would be going in for an appointment to have a transfer where the embryo would actually be implanted in me, only to say, no, I'm still not pregnant. To have social engagements where I was saying no to drinking or no to certain foods because I could be pregnant, only to turns out, no, I wasn't pregnant. Those were hard. And then at some point during our third round, we actually did successfully become pregnant. The anxiety doesn't stop there. Because then you hear when people go through trying to conceive journey and pregnancy without having those front end complications, because pregnancy, I learned, is never easy. There's this culture that says you don't want to tell anyone too early in case something happens. But with everything I had gone through, if something were to happen, I needed my tribe. So even when we did get pregnant the third time, it was still not relief, because then you're holding your breath each week to get to that next milestone. But I will say that as I engaged with my tribe and I found more tools and I found more resources to care for myself and I found the ability to persevere, I was able to stop thinking about this as when will the other shoe drop? And I started to think about, well, you never got this far before. well, you never got this far before. And I just kept telling myself that every week, the entire pregnancy, until our little girl did show up. So 3 years later, almost 4, November 2023, my little girl did enter the world, and my husband and I are still together through all that as well. So there's a lot in there of the things that you're not supposed to talk about that I did start talking about. And I think through engaging in those conversations, it helped my mental health, and it helped me to be healthy enough to carry a pregnancy. And so that includes that I started to talk about the struggles that we had as a couple. I started to talk about the struggles that I had individually. And I did end up eventually filling in my close network at work, which was the ultimate and final piece that was very hard to do. But when I did do that, I felt like I could bring my whole self to a situation, and I could go up and be there for everyone. So that's
Wow. What an
thank,
incredible story.
thank you so
So
much.
happy. So happy that you got your little girl in the end. I know IVF and infertility can be a very, very challenging time for couples.
Oh yeah.
How did these challenges of infertility and IVF shape your view of yourself and your marriage?
I'll start with my marriage because that's more obvious, because I'm still learning about myself, because as you know, because I know you have children, you keep changing your identity of yourself. But with my marriage, I'm more assured that this is my person. And when I say my person, if we can get through that, I mean, because it got to the lowest. And when I mean the lowest, both of us having mental health issues, both of us thinking so low of ourselves. And I always say, hurt people hurt people. And so for us to get to that and then to be able to overcome it and say, I don't think who that was is who you are. I think it strengthened us, and we can find that better version of each other. So it definitely strengthened our marriage to get through obstacles and to know that we want to get through those obstacles. Yeah.
So, what was the most surprising thing that you learned about resilience through your journey to parenthood?
The most surprising thing is that there's not one thing, and you might need to do a lot of things at once. And what I mean by that is, if you can get through it without medication, that's great. I could not. I am still medicated for depression. If you can get through it without therapy, that's great. I do see a therapist still. And then if you can get through it just doing natural, holistic things, that's good too. And that's part of my system. I mean, I'm much more routine than I used to be. I've always been A type, but I know I need to exercise so often. I need so much sunlight. I need a diet that's a certain way. So I do all those things in tandem to bring my best self to light. And so that was the most surprising thing, because you want to do one thing and then, oh, I'm good. I'm fine now. I have to keep doing them all still.
So, what role did communication play in keeping your marriage intact during such a challenging time, do you think?
We wouldn't be here if we didn't work on communication. The communication was not just how to communicate to each other on what you need, but also recognizing your biases when you communicate. What are you hearing that's maybe not said, or what did someone say that really triggered something else that they didn't say? I mean, that's important.
How has your dynamic as a couple shifted now that you're the primary breadwinner and
Yeah.
your husband is a stay-at-home parent?
Wow. Well, I've learned that those roles, at least in the United States, maybe culturally, but I don't want to assume, it's very gendered. And so we had to communicate explicitly a lot there, because it wasn't just, oh, you're stay at home, so you do everything domestic. There's so many domestic things that are still very gendered. So we had to have a discussion on, okay, well, you stay at home, but you're not necessarily still doing all these domestic chores. But I also don't know that makes sense, because I don't want you to burn out. Like, I need you to be home. And so we really had to be very explicit on what does it make sense for him to take on? What do I need to take on? What do I want to take on? What did I want to leave behind? And then I also think outside the house, there's also still a little bit of ego that I think that there's still not as many men that stay home, to be honest.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's very true. And it's a beautiful thing for a father to be able to do for his kids as well.
It's such a better dynamic for us as far as our personalities when it came to our work. And yet, we even looked up some statistics. The statistic of women who have stayed and they're working moms has doubled or more, but the statistic of men who stay at home has only gone up a couple of percentage. So if you think about that, women are more tired and overworked because that labor is not being passed on. A lot more of us are working. And so, but it's great for our personalities. And he's much better at the imaginary kid play.
I love it. I love it. So what advice would you give to couples navigating infertility and the strain it can place on a relationship?
The first thing I would say from a communication and each other standpoint is really, don't just, well, one, hopefully you're checking in, like, how are you with this? But don't just stop at how are you, really, what are you worried about?
Yeah.
What if this happens, then what for you? Because that's what we weren't doing. It was, I'm good, but really, I'm good, but I really think this is my fault. And if it doesn't work, will she blame me? And will she want to stay with me? Like, those were things that we didn't even know to ask. And so that's what I would say on the communication standpoint. And then on the finance standpoint, I would say that there's so many different avenues. And so I would think about digging into all the tests and figuring out different things you could do. So for example, to be very transparent, because I naturally ovulated, we were able to, at one round, do what's called a modified natural cycle, which means I was able to do less shots and only an oral hormone, which that was cheaper than the shots. So there's just little things like that you just don't know in the beginning that you can ask about that will give you some avenues. So that's the other thing, is I would take your results and join a fertility community so you can learn about all the resources out there, so you can really work the financial system of it. Sometimes you can travel. I've heard of people going to other countries where they cover it. I felt like I can't get down the street to my appointment. How am I supposed to leave the country? But for you, if you have the time to do it, there's a lot of things you could do in that sense too.
Oh, wow. Now, how has becoming a mother changed your perspective on your career and your ambitions?
Oh my gosh, I'm still figuring out, I'm just as ambitious. However, it does look different. And it looks different because I 100% feel like such a strong person because I got through IVF, and I got through IVF all while working and continuing to grow in my career. And yet now there's something else here that I do want to spend as much time to. And so it's an interesting dynamic that I'm still figuring out of how do I accomplish all I want in the workspace and still be able to be with her, because I was willing to work 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And now I don't want to, because I want to be able to be with her. But that doesn't mean I don't want to work harder. It's how can I be more efficient with that time, which includes a lot more delegating, to be honest. It includes knowing, which I had to learn with the domestic stuff at home, you have to give up control of some things at work and delegate so I can be with my daughter at home.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, how do you balance being a financial provider while being present to your family? So you've just answered that next question. But what challenges have you faced as a working mom and a breadwinner in a society that often prioritizes the traditional gender roles?
Yeah, I think that because that's what society, emphasizes the traditional gender roles. You can't make everyone happy, so you just have to do your own thing. And what I mean by that is I do believe there's people who think I'm still not home with her enough,
Right.
and I do think there's people who think that he should be working more. So you
Yes.
just kind of have to ignore those things because this is what works for us. Um, there's some things as a mom that I feel like I have to be at every time when really that maybe doesn't make sense if it means I'm gonna have to be stressed at work to rush to this, I mean, this happened one time when I'm learning, like I'm at swimming lessons and I said, "Oh, I'll be in a minute. I just have to do this call." And then I missed the entire swimming lesson and I felt bad about that. So I personally would rather just not schedule calls at that time. But
Yes.
I have a male counterpart who probably would have taken that call, or probably people wouldn't have thought anything of him missing the lesson for the call. So
Mm,
there's those social dynamics you have to deal with, and you just have to figure out again for yourself what works for you and what are you going to be okay with. But it's different for sure.
yeah. So, can you talk about your experience with mental health during this time and how you found the support? A lot of times we don't want to talk about this stuff, but it's so necessary.
Yeah. Um so again, my friend is the one who said, like, I think you're depressed.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, what? So when she said that, I then just started to look into, did my own WebMD diagnosis. And I first heard on a podcast ad about Talkspace, I think it was.
Right.
One of those online counselors. And I'm glad I did because it was very easy. I actually don't think it's a great method for counseling, but I do think it's a great method to get your foot in the door
Yes.
because it's really disconnected and you're texting and all that. And I was finding when I was texting this person about, like, here's what I have going on. Here's what happened. I was texting this person and my trial membership was about to end. So that's how I found the person and that's how I got my foot in the door. And
Mm,
she was the one that, bless her heart, I was matched with the right person, which, by the way, Talkspace was also the first way I realized matching is important because they
yeah.
actually because they actually encourage you if someone's not, meeting you, that you can just switch again. And it's easier
Right.
to cancel when it's just a little text message. So I found someone, we had a good rapport, and she was the one who said, if you're open to it, I'm actually in the St. Louis region. My practice is also in the St. Louis region.
Hey.
We should keep talking. And I'm glad she did. And that first appointment I had with her outside of it, and she could see me, I just said to her, I said, I just don't care about anything. And that's when it fully hit me how depression can show up and how it looks different for everyone. Because when I
Yeah.
went on the walk with my friend, I knew I was truly sad and beaten down. By the time I was talking to her, it was just a level of emotionless, and that's where medication needed to come in because I was just so numb. I was so numb by that point. Um,
Right.
and I just knew what I normally felt like, and that wasn't it. Um,
Wasn't it?
yeah, and I just really had to tell myself, Kristen, if you wanted to lose weight, you would find a trainer. If you wanted to look good for a show, you would like a show, like an event or something. I would hire
Yes.
I would hire a stylist. So there's no shame in you don't feel well mentally, getting some help and working with someone. I just had to tell myself that. And it still took some time to talk about it. It still feels a little weak to talk about it, but I only think talking about it will help because I know I'm a strong person. So,
Mm, mm. So, how did your husband's mental health journey affect your relationship and your shared challenges?
oh boy. So then I became the spouse therapist, and I was like, "You have mental health." So, uh, but truly, I noticed my stuff first, and so because of that, I then said, we should go to marriage counseling because I can tell we're not communicating. I was already aware of we're not communicating because I know I'm like things I'm saying are not coming in the right way. So we needed someone else to
Yes.
intervene. And then it was that person who help diagnose him. So that was important because when we're at our mental health lowest, they almost counter each other.
Right.
And so because now we know that we both have this going on, things don't escalate like they used to because
Mhm.
it's just like, whoa, I think you're like, we both kind of know when we're experiencing things, but also we're realizing when we're entering that territory. So it doesn't escalate to the point where, there's things I believe that you can't take back when you say.
Yes.
And so I don't think we get to that level anymore. Doesn't mean we don't fight, but I think we're just more aware of those signs of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's that awareness that really makes a difference.
yeah, for sure. For sure.
Now, navigating an interracial marriage in St. Louis must
Yeah.
have taught you quite a few things. What
Yeah.
has it taught you about love, identity, and resilience?
Yeah. Yeah, there's that whole aspect of this too. So my husband's white. But I think that's important to this story because straight white men have it good. But no, but really I do think it was even harder for him to admit that he might need help and there might be something going on. And I was more comfortable talking about what was going on in the greater picture before he was, but community is so important. So I really encouraged him to, share with your friends when you need. And that was really
Yes.
good. Yeah, that was really good for him. And also in this is important to the story too. In January 2021 was the insurrection on our
Yes.
country. And that was just on top of everything. That was very hard. And we had George Floyd, and there were just a lot of things that were happening while we were together. And we had always talked about race, but man, we were really tested on our race at that point because there were things that he realized I will just never understand. And now we're talking about having a child and how will you have those conversations with them? I really didn't want to be with someone who was just happy go lucky and I don't see color when we're about
Yeah.
to bring a child into this kind of world.
Mm.
So it added a dynamic of a little bit of mental stress for
Yeah. I
us
can imagine.
to be also saying, to be frank, you don't get to be neutral on this. I
No.
I want your opinion and you need to have an opinion. So that was very important, I think, to having a marriage counselor to navigate those conversations. And that was also important
Mm.
to us being strong together and knowing what does supporting the other in some of these things that if he was with someone white, he would maybe never have to do or talk
Think
about.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was actually really important. And the thing about us being St. Louis is kind of segregated. Not
Mm.
kind of, it is
Mm.
in some ways. So that was a whole nother area. And we personally did not, with our fertility team, have any struggles. But I've heard people with, again, me now being a Black woman, being pregnant, again, I was like, you need to look out for me and make sure you advocate for me. There were just these extra things that I
Yeah.
wanted him to understand the social commentary, the social piece of everything too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my last two questions for you are a bit of a time experiment.
Oh,
In the
okay.
first one, I'm going to take you back to the younger you, the young woman who was struggling with infertility, was in an interracial relationship. If you could go back and give her three nuggets of wisdom based on what life has taught you up until this point, what would those three nuggets of wisdom be?
Okay. If I could go back to me, that girl in January 2020 who thought the world is my oyster before it all came down, I would say to her, you are so much stronger than you know. You are so much stronger than you know. And if you trust in what is right, what is true to you, and believe in your partnership with Zach, your husband, you can get through anything. You can get through anything.
Last question. I'll take you into the future, and we're going to go and sit with a 90-year-old you this time.
Oh boy.
And you're sitting in your rocking chair. Maybe you're surrounded by your children, your grandchildren, whoever's with you at the end. If you could go and have a conversation with this wise woman who's leading you to this point, what will you say to her when you finally meet her?
I'm meeting myself at 90. Okay. If I were to meet myself at 90, I hope I'll be saying, you have opened the door for so many people, and their world has become better because you were in it, and you're looking really good for 90 years old.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Listen, thank you so much for coming online and sharing your story with us today. It's an absolute honor to have met you.
Thank you so much. This is an honor. I will be in Australia March next year.
Okay, so we need to get you to come and speak at our March events.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, if it lines up.
Day.
If it lines up, I would love to.
About that. Yes. Fantastic.
Okay.
Well, thank you to everybody who tuned in today. The Her Story Circle is not just a podcast. We are a social impact movement focused on bringing you the stories and voices of women from all over the world. We share our stories to uplift you, inspire you, energize you, empower you, but most importantly, to take you from where you are now to where you're trying to go. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. Thanks again, Kristin.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making